the onset of our very first COVID case in the state was March 13th. Of course, that was a Friday the 13th. I don't know if people remember that, but it was Friday the 13th. And the world changed. I've interviewed several nursing students who are working for us, and one of the questions we typically ask in the interview is, give me a situation where what you had planned totally got derailed, and what did you do about it? How did you handle it? Since the onset of COVID-19 and the pandemic, I would say probably 99% of them have said, well, something along the lines of, in January, I started my nursing semester in January, and we had this big group project we were working on, and we were just starting clinicals. And then we went to spring break, and the world changed. So that's what happened to all of us. We sat there and watched New York City struggle. We watched, the tents and the trucks that had bodies and all that stuff. And I think the South had a little bit more lead time to get ready for this. And so, like y'all, we were preparing for the pandemic. We realized that there was a big potential that there was going to be a surge of patients, that we would run out of beds like New York and other cities did. And David actually was in charge of the surge plan. We, came up with creative ways to extend nurses, education people like Laura and myself, who really don't do bedside very much anymore. We're going to be the hands and feet of nurses so that one nurse could take care of a lot more people. And then we had plans for some of our facilities to be utilized in alternative ways. So outpatient department might become an inpatient department, and hold inpatients that had COVID. The freestanding surgery center was going to be a clean facility with non-COVID patients. I mean, they had all sorts of things that, like y'all, everybody was trying to come up with all of the things what we were going to do. We started tracking the number of ventilator patients and the number of ventilators that we had available and that sort of thing. And we were all a little bit afraid. So that's what Baptist Health was looking at. The Alabama Board of Nursing really stepped up in March also, because it was like we had no patients. March 13th, we had one. By the end of that weekend, there were about 40 in the state, and it just snowballed from there. So the Board of Nursing looked at this, and they called an emergency meeting on March 20th, and they realized that there was going to be a real severe shortage of nurses if the curve didn't flatten. And, we had nurses not only leaving and going to travel, we also had nurses that were getting sick, and we were already in a little bit of a short spell there to begin with. So they looked at that and they said, okay, we're going to let you take the non-licensed assistive personnel who are actively enrolled in school, and we'll let you delegate things to them that heretofore you have not been allowed to delegate. And then they will become true nurse extenders. So they made our PCTs, we call them patient care techs, our PCTs who were currently enrolled in school qualified for this position. Any non-licensed assistive personnel does qualify for this role. You can go to the board's website and look at their emergency rules. And what I have here on the screen is the actual number for the emergency rule. You can read the entire rule. It does cover more than just the non-licensed assistive personnel. It also covers some other things as well, like some things that have to do with nurse practitioners and those sort of things. So if you go to that rule and go toward the bottom of the rule, it's one of the last things they discussed. You can see where they discuss the role of the non-licensed assistive personnel. So our PCTs, we thought the PCTs could be an extension of the hands and the head of the nurse, and we thought there would be a big potential benefit for the COVID-19 patients. By the end of March, we had several areas that were strictly COVID-19 areas. Nothing but COVID and PUI patients under investigation, were allowed in those areas. And the way they were trying to minimize the entry and exit of rooms meant that we needed more hands in there. So One person could be in the room doing whatever, another person could be outside the room acting as a gopher or doing whatever needed doing. Well, that kind of increases the number of people you need to take care of every patient. So we really felt like this was going to be a huge benefit to them. And we decided to move forward with the development of our A&E program. I worked so closely with the Board of Nursing that I'm sure they would look at their emails every day and go, oh my God, that woman's sending me another email. I don't want to talk to her again, you know. So we worked very quickly. We had HR and IT and education. The three of us, the three departments, probably worked closer together than we ever have before. We were all helping each other do our jobs. And that's as you know, it's an unusual thing. We all love to pull our hair out at the other departments because they won't do what they need to do. But in 1 week, we were able to do all the things that it took to have this position created. Everything from a job description to a position in Cerner. Cerner is our charting system, electronic charting system that we use. And Cerner was able to actually change the position of PCT. They were able to add the things that the A&E would need. For example, med administration is not typically something that a PCT has in their capabilities, but we had to add it because they are allowed to give certain medications. And we had to do wound care and discontinuation of Foley's and that sort of thing. So the board approved this originally for 120 days. So it was slated to expire in mid-July. I didn't have an exact date, but the 120 days was mid-July. So we moved so quickly that they had this ruling on the 20th of March, and our first class was April 13th. So I'll show you how we did that. The nursing leadership and HR immediately wanted this extended past that 120-day deadline. We all kind of thought, if you can remember, in March, we were all thinking that this was going to be gone by June or July. Do y'all remember that? And I don't believe our area peaked until July, but we thought it was going to be a done deal by then. I had told the nurse practitioners they could probably at least come back by June, to full clinical whatever. Anyway, so we really felt like this was going to be an ongoing thing. We could use it as an ongoing thing to extend the patient care capabilities of a nurse. So where a med-surg nurse might have 5 patients, with one of these A&Es, we felt like they could possibly take 6 or 7, maybe even 8, depending on the acuity, and not be overly taxed. So for those of you that don't really know the way that they work, and I will talk about this a little more, the board said that one of the big differences between a non-licensed assistive personnel or a PCT, and I will just refer to them as PCTs throughout the rest of the presentation, but a PCT, the difference between a PCT and an A&E, the biggest difference is the PCT is assigned to the floor. So whether you have 1, 2, 3, 4 PCTs, generally speaking, PCTs will split the hall up so that PCT number 1 will have room, 201 through 215 or something like that. And PCT number 2 will have room 216 through 230, or they'll split them 4 ways and they'll each have 7 patients, whatever they do. Basically, they will get vital signs, do AM care, blood sugars on their patients, and help with call lights and that sort of thing. Just typical nursing assistant or PCT work. With the A&E, by the board's ruling, they absolutely have to be assigned to a nurse, not to the floor. So they can still help on the floor, just like a nurse has their patients, but the nurse can also help other people with their patients as well. If you help me bathe my total care in this room, then I'll come help you bathe your total care in that room. So, all right. So this is where we are. So to ease the short of nurses, so the PCTs are assigned to the floor, the A&E is assigned to the nurse. So the theory is, and the way it works best is, the PCT and the nurse will listen to report on their joint patients together. and they'll ask questions together. And then once report is done, they sit down and they split up the job duties. There are some things that an A&E cannot do that the nurse has to do. So the job duties generally are split up in that based on those things. So the nurse would have to obviously do the initial assessment. They'll have to do any IVs or PRN medication administration, and also heparin and insulin. We do not allow the A&Es to give heparin and insulin because those are high alert meds, and we just don't want to put that risk on them. So they would do that. So the nurse may say, well, I'll do the initial rounds because I'm going to do the 8 o'clock assessments, and you do the 9 and 10 o'clock medications, and you can document the hourly rounding for those 2 time slots. And then I'll do the 11. Anyway, they just split it up to make it work for whatever's going on with their patients. So this is, especially with COVID, where there's so much physical labor that goes into taking care of a COVID-19 patients with the PPE doffing and donning and that sort of thing. The theory was that this is really going to help. And when it works very, very well. So it's a good experience for the A&Es. They have come back and told me that they absolutely love being an A&E. They're still doing PCT things. They're still doing vital signs, glucoses, baths, and that sort of thing. But they feel like they have ownership of the patients. It's not the floor, it's their patients. So they actually have ownership of the patients, and they are able to make some limited decisions, but they also have a backup. So it's almost as if they're doing a preceptorship. And it's terrific recruitment for new graduates. They are comfortable with your facility when they've been working there as a tech. It's almost like an extended preceptorship. They can actually do some things that are not allowed in a preceptorship. And of course, they can do some things in a preceptorship that they cannot do as an A&E. So it's a crossover. They also, we really hone in on the requirements that the Board of Nursing have. Like I said, they have to be assigned to a nurse, not to the floor. They absolutely have to be enrolled in an approved school of nursing. So if they drop out for a semester, they decide to take, maybe they take fall semester off. During that fall, they cannot be an A&E. They have to be a PCT. And then when they re-enroll in school, they can be a PCT. Now, if the school is out for the summer, but they are still actively involved in the school, that's okay. They just can't drop out for a semester and then come back in. They have to have completed certain courses, fundamentals, pharmacology, and medication administration. And they also have to have been checked off or validated in the skills that some of the skills that they do. Now, we discovered that schools no longer cover ostomy as a skill. They don't do the wafer application. Most of the students that we've encountered from these schools have not done that as a student. So we brought our wound ostomy care nurse in, and she does about an hour to an hour and a half on ostomy care and wound care and sterile dressings, and has them, that she actually has them do the wafer, cut the wafer, measure it, cut it, and apply it, and talks to them about, the pitfalls and that sort of thing. And they love that. They say they wish they had that. It was very fascinating to them, and they wish they had been able to do that in school. But that's one of the skills that they're allowed to do by the Board of Nursing. So it's worked out very well. So we have they also have to complete a class in the healthcare facility where they are being utilized. So, and we kind of made that class up. Now, y'all know as educators that if you're going to do an hour lecture, it takes more than an hour to put that lecture together. So I can't remember what the swap time was, but it's something like a 1 hour presentation is like 4 hours worth of work or something. And this was an 8 hour class we put together in no time. I mean, it is changing on a daily basis, because every time I teach it, I realize, well, maybe I should have done this a little bit longer, more time on this. And I really didn't have to spend all this time on how to DC a Foley. They got that. They understand how to DC a Foley. So it's a very fluid class. It changes like every time I teach it. So at the time of the emergency order, at the very beginning of all this, at the time that the emergency order was issued, the board said, as I've said before, the position would last for 120 days. That was changed in July. It is now a permanent position. And they did not say it would end with the pandemic. They said they have made it permanent. The position ends with graduation. And this is a little bit tricky. So if you have an A&E working for you, the day they graduate, the minute that diploma is in their hand or on their Zoom, they can no longer function as an A&E. We did request to the board that they allow them to remain A&Es until they receive their temporary license. The board said there is no lag time on their part, that the lag time is all on the schools, and they would not extend the time. So some schools, some students I know graduate and it takes a month to get their licenses, as y'all know. Others seem to do it pretty quickly, like in about a week or two period of time. But the board maintains that they generally issue those temporary licenses within, I think 48 hours is what the board said. They try to get them out within 48 hours of receiving all the paperwork from the schools. So they cannot function as an A&E once they graduate. And we make sure they know that. They originally said that new grad nurses who fail to pass boards may not continue as A&Es and may not work as A&Es. They recently received an email from Peggy Benson that says they decided to change that. This was changed in September. New grad nurses may now work as A&Es if they do not pass boards. And I would like to point out, I don't know how many of you are using LPNs. All of these rules apply to LPNs and RNs. The board does not use the term RN graduates. They say new grad nurses, and they generically refer to nurses. So if they're in LPN school or RN school, they can go into this category. And I don't think there's anything that the A&Es can do that LPNs cannot do. I'm not sure about that, but I don't think there is. So we petitioned the ABN quickly to allow the students to make this a permanent role. And we had several other hospitals. I think DCH was one of them. But South Alabama, DCH, and one or two other hospitals, I think maybe Huntsville, joined us with this petition. They used almost the same wording that we had used to petition, and we think that's why the board approved it pretty quickly. So the reason we wanted this to be a permanent role is it really is a relief to an overburdened nursing staff. It really gives them some not so much by yourself, even with 5 patients, if the acuity is high or you have a nurse short, you can have having this extra person to help you do your things. It's really been helpful. So if you think of a 30-bed floor, med-surg floor, and you have 6 nurses on that floor and they each have 5 patients, that's an ideal situation, plus a charge nurse and whatever other ancillary staff you have. And then if 2 of those people call in, all of a sudden you have 10 patients that have to be split up between the remaining 4 nurses. If you have an A&E, they can easily split those patients up. It's not difficult. And then you'll have 6 or 7 patients each, but they have an extra pair of hands there, and you've really extended your nursing staff without unduly stressing anybody. So it also gives the students much more clinical exposure. It's if you think back to the old diploma, the diploma programs were sort of designed to act as so the nursing students were actually in a position of an A&E, and they were doing most of the things that the A&Es do. So it really, really beefs up their clinical exposure more than just giving baths and doing glucoses, because they're having to make some clinical decisions. They do have a resource immediately available. That is why they have to be assigned to a nurse. But they still are making some decisions, and they're able to do some education, and they're just able to get their foot into the door so they can kind of look around the corner and see what professional nursing is really all about. And they have that's what they keep telling me. They really feel like they have such a much better grasp of what the professional role of nursing is. So it also gives them a strong clinical background by the time they graduate, and it gives them a real practical layer to meld together the textbook and patient care and a little more confidence as they move toward taking the NCLEX. And of course, the side effect that I love to talk about is it is an excellent recruitment tool. So what we did initially, after we had the job description, we worked very closely with our chief nursing executives and chief nursing officers. Nursing leadership was really involved. So once we had things in place and were ready to do our classes, we sent out emails and all sorts of things to educate the leadership, to coordinate how we were going to start this and when we were going to do it. The job description, it's the first time I've ever written a job description, but HR asked me to write it because they really didn't understand exactly the nuances of to be in compliance with the Board of Nursing. So I wrote the job description and then I sent it back to HR, and of course they kind of put it back into HR terms, but left the requirements so that it would meet the requirements of the Board of Nursing. And then we worked with the system CNOs to make sure that they were on the same page and understood how to utilize this position. We developed an information packet that had several things in it. It had, these are the things they can do, and this is what we have to go through before they can do them. And then these are the things they cannot do, and this is how best to utilize them. And so we had a little information packet there. And then we stayed in contact. As I said, I know they were tired of seeing my email pop up, but they were great about being so responsive, especially Peggy Benson, so responsive to all the questions and information I was asking for. And it was, I mean, for me, it was a real great experience. So with the nursing management, we did several different, like everything else, we tried to communicate in multiple ways. You know that they read every single email that the education department sent out, right? Everybody understands how they read all the emails. The educators, our clinical educators, discussed it on rounds. I called several of them. The places where we seemed to be real heavy with PCTs that were in nursing school, I called and talked to some of those managers. Places that were a little different than the med-surg floors, like the intensive care units and the ERs, we had multiple conversations about how best to utilize them in those places. They talked about it in huddle, and of course we repeated all that. So the other thing is we communicated via emails. These are the things that we sent out. The first few emails always included the board ruling. There are people who won't do anything if they can't read the board ruling, so we sent that out. And then our vision for how to comply with the board's rulings and the limitations that they set. And the position requirements, we had early on, we had several students try to come through class that their managers would enroll them in the class. The managers would say they met the qualifications, and they would get in the class. And the first thing I asked them is, everybody completed fundamentals? You have that semester behind you. That has not been a problem. Everybody had completed fundamentals. The second question was, has everybody had pharmacology? And that's the sticking point, because a lot of schools don't offer pharmacology until the second semester. So a lot of them cannot start until the third semester. They have to finish, not be enrolled in, but finish pharmacology. So now there are some schools who offer a basic pharmacology, introduction to pharmacology in that first or second semester, but then pharmacology is heavily integrated throughout the rest of the classes, depending on what class. So med-surg would have pharmacology, pediatrics has pharmacology, and that's okay. As long as they've had that basic pharmacology, they're good to go. And then we would explain the workflow, how to make it work. So once again, this A&E has to be assigned to a nurse. They have to work together. They don't split the patients up, they split the jobs up. So one of the early problems we had was they were assigning the nurse and A&E I think this particular floor had assigned 7 patients to the nurse and the A&E. And they gave 2 of the patients to the A&E and the rest of those 7 patients to the nurse, the other 5 to the nurse. So now the nurse's role has really increased. She still has to provide total care for her 5 patients and has to do the assessments, the PRN medications, the IV medications, the heparin and the insulin to the other 2 patients. There is no advantage there for the nurse, as you see. So it's not the patients that get split up, it's the jobs that get split up. Then we would go to attend meetings, and we would discuss the same exact things. And then we also would, on the phone, when people had questions, we would call them and go back through the entire things. And there's still, even though we've been doing this since April, there's still a little bit of misunderstanding in some quarters over this. Actually, one of the facilities wanted me to come to their nursing leadership meeting today at 11:30, but I couldn't do that because I had to be here at 12. So, you know, it's just to clarify, because there's still some lack of understanding. So the way we got really started with it, after we had everything in place, HR identified the PCTs in nursing school. They don't always know if they're in school, but they do have some, most of them actually were flagged as being in nursing school. They sent a list to the managers asking, of these, who do you recommend for this position? And then they contacted those PCTs. The CNOs encouraged their managers to look at their PCTs and identify the ones that might have been missed by HR. And then we tried to combine the list. The first class we limited to 6 people because for 2 reasons. One of them was that we did not know, we didn't know what the class was going to look like. We didn't know how long it was going to take or how intense it was or the questions they would have. So we wanted just a real small class. The second reason was that we were in the 1st of April, in the throes of the pandemic, and we were limiting everything to no more than 10 people. And we thought if we had 6 people in there, 1 or 2 of the other educators could come into the class. We could also have guest lecturers like the wound and ostomy care nurse, and then we would not be running over that 10 men. And we were able to social distance in that particular classroom because we limited the size. So the first class was a mix. We had all 3 hospitals, med-surg and the ED. I think we had 2 of the first class were from the same school. The rest of them were from different schools. And that was kind of fun. Gave them a support group. And it's always fun for them to talk about, well, I hated pharmacology. Oh, our pharmacology was great. You know, they were able to share all those little things they like to talk about. We talked about the position requirements. They had so many questions, most of which we were able to answer, but some of those we had to table and take to the board. So I learned early from that first class, I need their email addresses so that I can email answers to these questions out. So then we talked about the goals and the, you know, I can't take care of a COVID patient if I'm a student. And I said, well, that's true, but as an employee, you can. So, you know, we went through all those kinds of questions. I really did work with them on their areas they felt were weak. And that's where we spent our time. And then the other things some stuff they felt like they could just kind of slough over. And then we give them the same pharmacology review and exam that we give nurses that we onboard. There's an orientation pharmacology dosage and calculations kind of test that we give brand new nurses. So we give that test to them. That particular test actually has a lot of IV calculations on it, like heparin and that sort of thing. It also has an insulin sliding scale question on it. But I decided to go ahead and give that to them because the main thing is I want to make sure they can calculate, and that's all those are. And they don't have to take it when they switch to the RN position. And that to them, for some reason, that is just delightful to them. They would rather take it in that A&E class than take it when they're a nurse. And so we've had several of these A&Es come back through orientation as a nurse, and they just love the fact that they get to go have a break while everybody else is taking a test. So it really has kind of been nice. We also go over injection techniques because they are allowed to give shots. So we go to the skills lab and they do injections in there, and they drop medication and that sort of thing. They can do sterile dressing changes, so we do a sterile dressing change together. And as I've said before, we have the wound and ostomy care nurse come in and spend about an hour with them. Physical therapy, everybody gets when they're hired. We did have our physical therapy educator come in a few times for a few classes until everybody sort of got caught up. And now everybody, starting about a year and a half ago, physical therapy is part of our orientation process. So now we're at the point that if they haven't had physical therapy, if they didn't spend time with physical therapy when they oriented as a PCT, then we'll just send them to the department and they do a one-on-one orientation. That first class ran over that 8 to 4:30. They got 45 minutes for lunch. We don't have a lunchroom in our facility, so we sometimes will give them a little bit longer for lunch. So we gave them 45 minutes for lunch, and we still ran over that 4:30 mark, that first class. So, as I said, it's a very fluid structure. We spend a good bit of time talking about what schools they come from, where they are, where they're working, what they want to be when they grow up. The class is an overview. We make that real clear. It's not a final deal. We do combine different teaching modalities, like you do just about in every class. But we also do competency verification at the bedside, because you can't really do that in this classroom situation very well, as we all know. We give them, right now we're giving them a competency checklist. Since this has been made a full-time position, we will enter them into net competency so they can be validated like everybody else. We do a quick review and evaluation, but we want to extend that so that I really get a better feel from them. And I also give them my business card, which has my contact information on it, and I give them my personal cell, because I don't necessarily have my business cell phone with me all the time. And there have been so many questions that have come up on the weekends or after 5 o'clock in the afternoon that they really need to get hold of somebody if they don't know if it's something's okay for them to do. So they feel free to contact me, but honestly, they're very respectful of my time. They usually just contact me during business hours. I've gotten about 7 or 8 phone calls after hours, and I certainly don't mind. I'd rather take care of a problem before it's a problem. So the feedback has been very positive. As I said, the leadership was pushing for this to be a permanent position, and we've been tweaking it at every turn. Managers will ask us about something. The ER at one of our facilities wanted them to be able to collect the information for medications by history, and really nobody could see anything wrong with that. I did ask the board if it was okay, and they said as long as a nurse, a registered nurse, a licensed nurse, an LPN or an RN signs it off, it's okay. So we allow them to collect the information. Now, unfortunately, in our computer system, we can't figure out a way for them to actually enter that information in the computer and leave it sitting there for somebody else to sign off. So what they do is they actually physically collect the information and give it to the nurse for input when they can. So the board was not willing for them to take primary responsibility, that they want the nurse to sign it off as verified. But that's still a big help. We've had a total of 13 classes. We did have one special class for the new grads who did not pass boards. That was a very short class. It was not 8 hours. They've done all that stuff in orientation. They don't need to do it again. We spent just a few hours together. We discussed the role, how careful they need to be to not fall back into the new grad mode. They need to stay inside the bounds that is established by the Board of Nursing. But the thing that this did, we had 6 or 7 nurses in this class, and it gave them such an automatic, immediate support group. It was, they said that was their favorite part of it. They exchanged phone numbers, they exchanged techniques for studying. They all talked about what they thought they had done, that they could do better to pass boards the next time. And so that was I kind of liked that. I mean, it was a whole different thing for me, but I think it was real helpful to them as well. So the class size varied. I taught every educator's favorite class of 1 several times. HR would call and say, we missed one. We missed somebody that was, our manager didn't get her information in, or I just let it fall through the cracks. So I had probably 3 or 4 classes with just one person in there. I had other classes that had 15. Most of them are basically 5 to 7, which is just a lovely size for a class. Now I'm doing them once a month, and the once a month classes are going to be between 10 and 15, I think. So my PowerPoint stopped going. The board has made it permanent, as I said, and the new grads can also work in this position. Now, originally this class started in April, and it was supposed to end in, the position was supposed to end in July. So we hired everybody as a PCT, and then we added the A&E as a second position, and that avoided HR having to literally transfer everybody back and forth in a 2-month period of time. So we hired them as a PCT, and then we asked them to orient as a PCT 9 to 12 shifts for about a month. And that was real easy this summer because very few schools were doing clinicals. Most of the PCTs were able to work full-time hours, and they were able to fulfill this obligation within an easy month. Then after that month, they went to the class, and we would add the second position. So this means that when they clocked in, they had to know if they were going to be utilized as a PCT or as an A&E for that shift. There was a significant difference in the pay between those two. And so they, of course, want to work as an A&E all the time. But the managers a lot of times needed PCTs more than they needed an A&E, so they never knew what they were going to be used as. And then, the manager or staff in office would decide how they worked. So right now we're in the process of changing it so that the A&E is the position for which they're hired. All of those who are currently A&Es will be switched so that it's their primary position. I'm hoping we can do that in a month or two. In a week or two. We're going through the C-suite approval process. We have one more little step to go, and I'm sure it will be approved. But this is the only thing that's been the dissatisfier. This is, you can imagine, very frustrating. So Sally is used every single day in the ER as an A&E, where Laura may only get 2 days a month as an A&E, and the rest of the time she's working as a PCT. So she's not doing the work that she wants to do, and she's not being paid the same that Sally's being paid, even though they went to class together, right? So we're trying to straighten those sorts of things out. We would have them go through orientation exactly like the PCTs go through orientation, and we would still want them to work some shifts as a PCT before they become an A&E, and that is at the recommendation of those who have gone through this class and have been PCTs and A&Es. They said, even though it's a lot of fun to be an A&E, it does add a whole nother layer to what they do, and they felt like it would be important for the PCT A&Es to really understand the workflow and how to do things before you add these other responsibilities to them. So that's what we will do. Let's see. The things that we need to do, we kind of think we need to lengthen the class. I would like it to be a day and a half so that I could focus a little bit longer and a little bit more detailed on especially med administration, but some of the other things that I feel like we just kind of brush over too much. And I would like to get some bedside nurses, different ones to teach different parts of the class, to come over and just review things, because I believe, well, if you look at the research, when you get bedside nurses to come do things with you in education, then they get a lot more engaged in whatever it is you're doing, and they can take it back out to the rest of the world. And it also gives a level of legitimacy to the class that just an educator may not be able to do. We need to work on a more formal orientation plan for the bedside. Right now, they just spend a day or two with the nurse with a normal load, kind of working through the work process so they can see how it flows, and then they're an A&E and they're on their own. And then I would like to develop a self-evaluation tool for them so that we can keep improving this as we go along. So there is some literature out there available on the use of extenders for RNs, non-licensed extenders. Not very much, but there is a little bit out there. And that's all I got. If y'all have any questions, I will be glad to entertain them.
Thank you so much, Kitty. We do have a few questions that were rolling in during the presentation. Again, just as we open the Q&A and open the floor for questions, we ask that you use the chat feature. Type those in and we will get them answered for you. I'll make sure Kitty doesn't leave without answering everyone's questions. One of the questions, Kitty, was, would you be willing to share the job description and packet with the group?
I would have to ask HR if that's okay. I'm willing to. The packet, I'm happy to send that out. The job description, I don't know if I can do that without HR's, blessing, but I will ask them.
All right. Next, Kitty, you mentioned that the A&E has to be assigned to a nurse. Is this a Baptist requirement or is this a board requirement? The ruling says, quote, a nurse may delegate selected nursing activities supportive to licensed nurses to nursing students.
I have that ruling somewhere on my desk. Those of you that know me know what that means. The board does say that the A&E has to be assigned to a nurse for the shift. The nurse can select which things they will delegate to the A&E, and the board, if the board said if the nurse feels that the A&E is not capable of providing those things or they're unsafe, they can remove that delegation from the A&E. Now, what they do in the emergency department is they assign the A&E to the charge nurse, and the charge nurse delegates to the A&E what tasks they do and what tasks they don't do. And so they basically act as function pretty closely to what an LPN would in the ER as a task nurse. So go discharge this patient, go give this one-time medicine to a patient. So the medication administration in the ER, we talked a lot about that, and we realized the board's intent. The board will not allow nurses to give A&Es to give PRN medications because they obviously do not want them making those clinical judgment decisions about, is this the right medicine for the patient and that sort of thing. But something that is ordered for a specific purpose, a one-time or a routine medication they can give. So the ER medications are ordered as one-time medication, a one-time shot of Zofran or one-time, something along those lines. So so that's how they're utilized in the ER, and it's worked very well down there. Does that answer the question you think? David, you're muted. I see your lips.
I know, moving. I do it every time. Candace, did that answer your question?
For that question, the reason I was asking is because I have the ruling in front of me, and it does, like I said, like you kind of mentioned in there, it says a licensed nurse may delegate, and then like number 1, it says that the licensed healthcare facility has to authorize the delegation. And then what you were talking about, Kitty, where it says that the licensed nurse may suspend or withdraw, I was just not seeing where it said that they had to be assigned specifically to a nurse. But what you're talking about as far as working with a charge nurse really makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think they need, okay, I'm looking at the ruling, but I'll back off that and go with what you're saying. As long as they have an immediate resource, which would be the charge nurse, then that would work. And what we talked about yesterday with the CNOs was if the floor needs PCTs, if they're working as a PCT, they cannot do the A&E functions. However, if they're working as a PCT, assign them to the charge nurse so that the charge nurse can delegate specific things to them, because the charge nurse would be very aware of the needs of the floor and what's going on and that sort of thing. Right. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
The other question I had was, how long will they allow the graduate who does not pass boards to remain in A&E role? What about more for student who fails the boards more than once?
We have an A&E that has failed boards more than once. We did not ask that question. They said if new graduate nurses fails to pass board, it may become an A&E. That nurse may become an A&E. We have one that has failed twice. So he is an A&E. And they didn't address that question. And I think the main thing is they've had the education. They have to go with us through a class. We have to validate that they can do certain things so the board's comfortable with them being in that role. I'm not going to ask the board that question.
Forgiveness rather than permission, right?
Exactly.
Any other questions? See some of you who are typing, so we'll wait.
I'm trying to look through the questions.
Appreciate the information, Kitty.
My pleasure.
It's wonderful.
And if anybody has questions later, please feel free to call me. Contact Laura. She can give you my contact information. You all have her. You have her email. My email is almost the same as hers. It's kharris@baptistfirst.org, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
All right. If there's no further questions, just a little information about evaluations. First, thank you all for attending the webinar. We hope it was extremely beneficial to you and your hospital and your practice. Please remember to, when you receive your evaluation, to be sure to complete it fully, including your nursing license number. Once it's complete, please email them to Laura Harris at the email listed on the slide to ensure that you receive your CEUs attached to this presentation. For those of you who have joined by phone, that email address is lbharris@baptistfirst.org. Again, lbharris@baptistfirst.org. If more than one person was watching with you, sharing Zoom in the same room, we ask that you please send names and email addresses to Laura so that she can send you your evaluation and make sure everyone again gets their CEUs and the evals completed appropriately. Again, if you join via phone, please make sure you email Laura Harris at the email address I gave to make sure you get your evaluation. If your name is something other than your name, so for instance, we have a few people on here whose Zoom names are just a first or just a last name or just a bunch of numbers. We won't know who you are, so we won't be able to give you credit unless you email Laura and let her know that you attended the class today. If there's no further questions, that'll end the session.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank everybody.
Thank you.